May 19, 1943, North Atlantic, 400 miles southeast of Greenland. The U-304's radio operator pressed his transmitter key, tapping out the contact report in crisp, practiced Morse. Convoy spotted, position transmitted, 20 seconds, maybe 22 at most. He released the key and glanced at his commander with professional satisfaction. Safe? German naval intelligence had been explicit-line direction-finding equipment needed a full minute to locate a radio signal. 30 seconds provided a comfortable margin. But 500 miles away, a British telegraphist watching a glowing cathode ray screen had already marked their bearing. 6 seconds. That's all it had taken. An escort destroyer was already turning toward them at flank speed, bow wave climbing, and in that frozen instant between German confidence and British precision, the mathematical foundation of Admiral Dönitz's entire U-boat strategy had already shattered like ice under a hammer. Before we surface from these dark Atlantic waters, if you're finding value in this untold story of technological miscalculation, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into World War II's hidden battles. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, whether you're in London or Los Angeles, Hamburg or Hong Kong. These stories connect us across continents and generations, and knowing you're out there makes sharing them even more powerful. Admiral Karl Dönitz stood in his operations room beneath layers of concrete in occupied France, utterly confident in his calculations. The year was 1939, and he commanded the Kriegsmarine's U-boat force with methodical Prussian precision. He was no fool. He understood that every radio transmission created vulnerability electromagnetic, waves spreading outward like ripples on dark water, potentially intercepted by enemy listening stations scattered across the Atlantic Rim. But Dönitz had consulted his experts. German naval intelligence had assessed Allied capabilities with characteristic thoroughness. Their conclusion gave him the confidence to build an entire tactical doctrine on a single assumption. CONVENTIONAL direction-finding equipment required approximately 1 minute to determine a bearing. The technology seemed straightforward enough. Direction finding worked by rotating a loop antenna through different angles, measuring signal strength at each position until the operator found the null point, the angle where the signal disappeared, indicating the transmission's direction. The antenna had to physically rotate. Mechanical movement took time. One full sweep required roughly 60 seconds. Simple physics, immutable reality. Or so the Germans believed. German radio operators trained relentlessly to exploit this perceived window of safety. They developed Kurzsignale short signals. Messages were pre-encoded into compressed 4-letter groups. An experienced operator could transmit a complete contact report in roughly 20 seconds. Convoy position, course, speed, compositional, communicated in a burst shorter than it took to brew coffee. Dönitz believed this made his submarines effectively invisible to Allied direction finding. He told his commanders explicitly, transmissions under 30 seconds were safe. The mathematics seemed irrefutable. If detection required 60 seconds and you transmitted for 20, simple arithmetic protected you as surely as armor plate. Based on this conviction, Dönitz built Ruddle Tactic Wolfpack tactics. Instead of lone submarines prowling vast empty ocean, U-boats would concentrate into coordinated hunting groups. One boat spotting a convoy would transmit a contact report. Others would converge like wolves on wounded prey. They would send position updates, weather data, fuel status, acknowledgments. Coordination required constant radio communication. But radio silence was unnecessary when transmissions were too brief to locate. The entire tactical doctrine balanced on that single assumption, 30 seconds, was safe. The Germans checked their cryptographic security repeatedly. Mathematical experts confirmed that Enigma was unbreakable. The machine's rotor combinations created astronomical permutations. When convoys mysteriously changed course before encountering submarine picket lines, German intelligence attributed it to aircraft reconnaissance or chance. In September 1941, Dönitz asked directly, "Could the enemy have broken our codes?" The answer came back with bureaucratic certainty. On September 19th, a penetration of our cipher does not come into question. October 1941 marked the moment of final confirmation. The Naval War Staff Radio Reconnaissance Section conducted a comprehensive investigation. Their conclusion established policy for the remainder of the war. Codes were secure. Direction finding was slow, standard precautions were sufficient. This assessment sealed the fate of thousands who would die never knowing their assumptions were catastrophically wrong. What the Germans didn't know was that British technology had leaped forward by an entire generation, while German intelligence still measured enemy capability by their own equipment standards. 1926. 14 years before war began, British physicist Robert Watson-Watt developed something revolutionary in a laboratory far from foreign attention. Instead of mechanically rotating an antenna, he fed radio waves from an antenna array directly into a cathode ray oscilloscope. The display instantly showed an ellipse indicating bearing. No mechanical movement, no sweeping through angles. 1927, no waiting. The bearing appeared the moment the signal arrived, a glowing phosphotrace that could theoretically determine direction from a transmission lasting 1/1000th of a second. By September 1939, British naval vessels and shore stations had incorporated this cathode ray principle into operational equipment. When a U-boat transmitted, an operator watching the oscilloscope saw the bearing appear instantly. He pressed a foot pedal, triggering warning bells. He shouted coded alerts. He read the angle from the glowing trace. The entire process took seconds, 5, 6, perhaps 8, for an inexperienced operator. Not 30, not 60. Just heartbeats between transmission and detection. The Germans assumed everyone used rotating loop technology. They calculated based on one minute detection time. They never imagined electronic direction finding had made their assumptions obsolete before the first U-boat put to sea. This miscalculation would multiply across thousands of transmissions, hundreds of convoy battles, millions of square miles of dark water compound error that would destroy nearly 1/4 of all U-boats lost during the war. The British called it high-frequency direction finding. The abbreviation was HFDF, pronounced Huff-Duff, a nickname that made deadly technology sound almost casual. From September 1939, shore stations ringed the Atlantic like electronic sentinels, Flower Down in Hampshire, Ford End in Essex, Scarborough in Yorkshire. Stations in Scotland, Iceland, Newfoundland, Bermuda. By war's end, over 40 stations provided coordinated coverage. Each station used aerial arrays feeding underground cables to equipment huts where operators worked around the clock. When a U-boat transmitted, multiple stations detected it simultaneously. Each obtained a bearing within seconds. Bearings were telephoned to the Admiralty in London, where staff plotted them on massive wall charts. Where bearing lines crossed, there was the U-boat. A single station might be off by 50 miles at extreme range, but 5 stations using triangulation could pinpoint position within 10 to 20 miles, close enough to route convoys clear, close enough to vector aircraft to specific search grids. This was strategic coverage. Shore stations building comprehensive pictures of U-boat dispositions across the entire ocean, but the truly devastating innovation came later. Late 1941, HMS Culver received one of the first experimental shipboard Huff-Duff installations. The equipment was bulky, temperamental, difficult to operate on rolling, spray-soaked escort vessels. Then, in January 1942, U-105 sank Culver. This temporarily dampened enthusiasm, but pioneers pushed forward. Canadian Lieutenant Commander D.W. Pears installed Huff-Duff on HMC's Restigouche during repairs, acting on his own initiative before official approval. Polish engineer Wojciech Straszewski solved severe problems with ship superstructure interfering with radio waves. His innovations made practical shipboard systems possible. By February 1942, systematic installation on convoy escorts began. Production ramped slowly. Cathode ray tubes were desperately scarce. But by early 1943, Huff-Duff became standard equipment, and this tactical revolution proved even more devastating than strategic shore networks. An escort equipped with Huff-Duff could detect a U-boat the instant it transmitted. The oscilloscope lit up. The operator pressed his foot pedal. Warning bells rang. The senior officer immediately dispatched escorts to run down the bearing at 20 knots, throwing up bow waves visible for miles. Even without making attacks, without dropping depth charges, it achieved its purpose. The U-boat was forced to dive, and a submerged boat traveling 7 knots underwater versus 17 on the surface quickly lost contact with convoys. Wolfpack coordination collapsed. Submarines groped blindly below, while convoys executed evasive maneuvers above. If 2 escorts had Huff-Duff, they could triangulate precise positions. U-boats attempting to report convoy location would find escorts racing toward them from multiple directions within minutes. The tactical contradiction became insoluble. Coordination required radio communication. Communication enabled instant detection. Detection forced submergence. Submergence broke coordination. All intelligence flowed to a subterranean room in London's Admiralty, nicknamed the Citadel, the submarine tracking room operated around the clock with about 36 staff at a square table covered with Atlantic charts. Commander Roger Wynne led this room from January 1941. His appointment was unprecedented. A civilian barrister confined to a wheelchair, no naval background, yet he proved exceptionally gifted at predicting U-boat movements, integrating Huff-Duff bearings with decoded Enigma messages and sighting reports. Colored pins marked charts red for confirmed U-boat positions, white for sightings, blue for estimates. Wynne collapsed from overwork in December 1942, but continued serving until war's end. The Americans established parallel organization in December 1942. Commander Kenneth Knowles ran F-21, Atlantic section from Washington. The centers maintained continuous communication, creating a transatlantic surveillance web. By mid-1943, the system achieved devastating effectiveness. Shore stations detected U-boats concentrating. The Admiralty routed convoys through gaps. Ship-based Huff-Duff detected shadowers. Escorts aggressively prosecuted bearings. Support groups, free-roaming hunter-killers, not tied to specific convoys, hunted contacts for days, holding submarines down until batteries died and they surfaced into waiting guns. Integration with decoded Enigma created comprehensive coverage. Enigma provided strategic intelligence patrol line locations, operational orders, but decryption took time, sometimes 36 hours. When Germans changed ciphers, temporary blackouts occurred. From February to December 1942, four-order naval Enigma remained largely unbroken 10 critical months. During blackouts, Huff-Duff prevented disaster. The systems complemented perfectly. Enigma revealed intentions. Huff-Duff revealed positions instantly. Enigma took time but provided strategic depth. Huff-Duff was instantaneous but required transmissions. Enigma was vulnerable to code changes. Huff-Duff worked regardless of encryption. Together they wove a net no U-boat could escape. And through all this, Germans continued transmitting 20-second messages, confident in safety margins that existed only in their March 1943 represented the nadir of Allied fortunes. 120 ships were sunk worldwide, 82 in the Atlantic alone. 476,000 tons against only 12 U-boats lost. Britain faced critical supply shortages. The Royal Navy later concluded Germans never came so near to disrupting communications between the New World and the Old as in the first 20 days of March 1943. Convoys, HX-229 and SC-122, endured what German radio called the greatest convoy battle of all time. 3 Wolfpacks Robgraf, Stürmer, Dränger totaling 38 U-boats, attacked 22 merchant vessels, sank. 146,000 tons, over 300 merchant seamen died. Only 1 U-boat was lost. The Royal Navy grimly noted it appeared possible that we should not be able to regard convoy as an effective system of defense. Admiral Dönitz believed victory was within reach. Just a few more boats, a few more attacks, and Britain's supply lines would snap. He had no idea every piece was falling into place for his defeat. By May 1943, convergence was complete. Widespread shipboard Huff-Duff reached critical mass. Very long-range liberators closed the mid-Atlantic air gap. Escort carriers brought air cover anywhere. New 10-centimeter radar was undetectable by German warning receivers. Decoded Enigma flowed consistently. Support groups hunted independently. Improved weapons increased lethality exponentially. The statistics are brutal. In May 1943, 41 U-boats sank, 25% of operational strength destroyed in 1 month. Against this, only 34 Allied ships were lost in the Atlantic. The exchange ratio completely reversed. In March, 10 ships per U-boat. In May, less than 1 ship per boat. The mathematics suddenly favored the Allies overwhelmingly. May 19, 1943. Convoy SC-130 departed Halifax with 37 merchant ships. German signals intelligence reported its location. 25 U-boats formed patrol lines to intercept, but Allied Huff-Duff and decoded Enigma had warned the Admiralty. The convoy received heavy reinforcement. Commander Peter Gretton prepared aggressive defense. U-304 found the convoy evening of May 18th and began shadowing. Every transmission lit up escort oscilloscopes. Escorts raced down bearings. The U-boat dove repeatedly, losing contact. It resurfaced, transmitted again. Another bearing, another escort charging through darkness. Other boats attempting to join transmitted their own signals. Each transmission was detected within seconds. Each detection brought aggressive response. The Wolfpack couldn't coordinate. Individual boats were scattered, harassed, prevented from establishing attack positions. On May 19th, long-range aircraft joined, guided by Huff-Duff, to attack surfaced boats. British escorts detected U-954, transmitting and prosecuted relentlessly. The U-boat was destroyed with all hands 52 men, including Peter Dönitz, the Admiral's son, dying without understanding his 20-second transmission, had sealed his fate. Admiral Dönitz learned of his son's death May 21st. He ordered battle to continue with cold professionalism. But battle was already lost. By May 20th, 5 U-boats had been destroyed. 0 merchant ships sank, not one. The convoy completed crossing intact. 35 of 37 ships reached Britain safely. Dönitz called off the attack midday, May 20th. May 24th, 1943, Dönitz withdrew U-boats from the North Atlantic. He acknowledged in his war diary, "We had lost the Battle of the Atlantic." U-boats would attempt returns with improved technology, snorkels, better torpedoes, acoustic weapons, but they never regained initiative. The decisive battle was fought and won. The Germans knew something fundamental had changed. U-boats dying at unprecedented rates, convoys evading patrol lines with uncanny precision, escorts appearing minutes after transmissions. But they didn't understand what defeated them. August 10th, 1943, German headquarters issued Current Order 38. First acknowledging Allied direction-finding capabilities, the order stated the inaccuracy of the bearings between approximately 50 and 60 miles is compensated for by radar. Location, 50 to 60 miles. They still believed Allied direction finding was that inaccurate. They never grasped that shipboard Huff-Duff located them within a few miles. They attributed precision to radar, not understanding Huff-Duff alone provided sufficient accuracy. No fundamental doctrine change occurred. At Nuremberg, 1945-46, Admiral Dönitz testified about the war at sea. He repeated, "Our ciphers were checked and rechecked to make sure they were unbreakable." No evidence suggests he ever fully acknowledged Enigma had been comprehensively broken, or that Allied direction finding was 5 times faster than German intelligence assessed. He went to his grave believing radar, and aircraft not Huff-Duff, and Ultra were primary causes of defeat. Overall, Huff-Duff contributed directly or indirectly to approximately 24% of all U-boats sunk, 188 of 785 boats lost in combat. The U-boat service suffered 28,000 dead of 40,000 submariners, 70% casualties. Highest of any service in the war. The fatal contradiction was inescapable. Wolfpack tactics required radio communication, communication enabled detection, detection forced submergence, submergence broke coordination. German precautions were meaningless against technology so advanced, their assumptions became fiction. The British achievement deserves recognition beyond simple technological superiority. They developed technology Germans didn't know existed. They deployed it systematically across an entire ocean. They integrated it with code-breaking and operational innovation. They maintained security so complete Germans never understood what defeated them. Commander Roger Wynne in the tracking room. Polish engineer Straszewski solving installation problems. Canadian officer Piers acting on initiative, thousands of operators manning remote stations, watching oscilloscope screens through endless watches, taking bearings that routed convoys clear of danger. Admiral Dönitz calculated 20-second transmissions were safe. He checked assumptions with German thoroughness. Experts confirmed them. He built entire tactical doctrine on that foundation, and he was wrong by a factor of 5. British technology obtained bearings in 6 seconds, not 36. That single miscalculation, multiplied across thousands of transmissions, across years of operations, across the Atlantic's vastness, contributed to destroying nearly 1/4 of the U-boat force. Even at war's end, even at Nuremberg, Dönitz never fully acknowledged the truth. Germans checked ciphers and found them secure. They assessed Allied direction finding and concluded it was too slow. They investigated repeatedly and confirmed assumptions. They were trapped in circular reasoning that proved fatal. The British, meanwhile, developed technology, deployed it operationally, integrated it with code breaking, exploited it tactically, and maintained securities so complete their enemies died without understanding what killed them. That is the difference between confidence built on ignorance and superiority built on innovation, between assuming enemies use the same technology you possess and developing capabilities they cannot imagine, between checking assumptions against your own knowledge and testing them against operational reality. Every U-boat commander transmitting a 20-second contact report believed he was safe. The bearing was already plotted, the escort was already racing toward him, and he would never know, as he shouted dive orders, that British technology had detected him almost instantly. 6 seconds, that was all it took. 6 seconds to obtain bearing, minutes until forced to submerge. The wolf pack disrupted. The convoy escaped. Multiply that by thousands of transmissions, hundreds of convoys, years of systematic employment. The mathematics became inexorable. That is how British Y-service and high-frequency direction finding shattered German U-boat supremacy. Not through propaganda, through technology, operational innovation, and security, so complete the truth remained hidden until 3 decades after war's end. Admiral Dönitz thought 30 seconds was safe. The British needed only 6. And that difference, more than almost any other single factor, determined who would control the Atlantic and ultimately which side would win the longest battle of World War II.